The Battle of Trieste by F.T. Marinetti. Our train is moving toward Trieste, the red powder keg of Italy. Oh, what feelings of rage we have, we futurist poets, bearers of explosive ideas, destroyers of the old Italy, pent up in this compartment like eagles in a cage. But our spirits rush on in the darkness, ahead of the train, which tries hard to keep up with us. The day is not far off when, perforce, people will have to recognize on our piled-up corpses the agonizing sincerity of our program and the tragic seriousness of our violence. This, however, will not stop us from being happy, wildly happy, this evening, if for no other reason than to scoff at the slowness of the clapped-out trains that is carrying us, creaking throughout the whole length of its black flame, clacking its rattling teeth, dragging its iron slippers and stretching itself out in all the stations like a drunkard in the wine haze of every tavern. Treviglio, Brescia, Verona. Away with misery and seriousness. We shall go dancing and singing to the war. Here's Vicenza. The fog stinks of old bigots. Well, in fact, we're passing over the snuff-ridden, moldering spirit of Senator Fogazzaro. How disgusting. Hundreds of electric lamps stretch away before us, to right and to left. Our luminous futurist phlegm spat into the filthy night. At dawn, the border, tragic stony ravines, the likely theater of future battles. Each one of us is already silently deciding upon his combat position. Cormons, Miramar, and here is the Adriatic, an immense gray flag unfurled, beating rapidly and waiting anxiously for the sun to transform it into the triumphant tricolore of Italy. Trieste at last. A flurry of excited cries, a lightning outburst of hurrahs. All our friends have come to wait for us. 100 eager hands are held out toward us. 100 excited and raptured glances search feverishly among us for the one invisible God, the uplifting Italian standard. At 7 in the evening, behind the curtain at the Rossetti Theatre, we are bickering about the tricolour borders of a poem with the Austrian chief of police, who preens himself with his decorations, while a roaring torrent-like crowd floods into the galleries. When at last we show ourselves at the footlights, the whole population of Trieste is before us, all of them, with the burning youth of its pugnacious males and the glitter of Parisian elegance, which makes the litheness of its women so distinctive. Outside, a tide of thousands clamored violently, hemmed in between the vile cordons of policemen. Are there any professors, any pedants, or invalids in the auditorium? Not that we can see. Silence of the Assize Court, when sentence is passed, or rather, silence of the submarine depths, where I fling forth the sentences of my speech like torpedoes against the ancient Roman galleys, which pitch invisibly upon the heaving and surging of the crowd. Speech to the people of Trieste, friends or enemies perhaps. I shall not be talking to you today about the essential ideals of futurism, but rather about its practical, directly utilitarian point of view. Have you ever thought about the vast army of dead geniuses, who are now practically unknown, yet who constrict the small battalion of living geniuses on all sides, crushing them relentlessly? We only think about dead geniuses. We work and we spend only for them. Everything is granted them. All things are offered. Everything is easy for them. Streets are leveled. Doors are thrown wide open. Everywhere they go in triumph throughout our cities. They come into our houses, and with the stench of their tombs they pollute our spring air. Oh yes, the tombs march against us, the ominous seepage from the cemeteries. The dead take possession of the living. Cemeteries. What am I saying? Italy shouldn't be called the land of the dead, but rather the bank of the dead. No, don't laugh. I'm speaking the terrible truth. It is only the dead who are well paid. The living receive nothing but derision, insults, false accusations, and they go hungry. The young are the most downtrodden, and it is for the young especially that we strive, for they are the most alive of the living. Obviously, the money that is spent on art in Italy doesn't end up in the pockets of the dead, but rather in the well sewn up pockets of their sextons. I mean, of course, the traditionalist publishers, the professors, the scholars, and the useless critics, whose base venality and disparaging envy we violently oppose. Under the reign of these exploiters of the past, every day a poet of genius is killed off, through hurling upon him the paper mummy of a poet who died 500 years ago. The publishers bin the manuscripts of a famished genius in order to lavish their money on sumptuous editions of masterpieces, which are well known to all and which have been reprinted 100,000 times already. American millionaires, urged on by these self-advertising money grubbers, come to Italy to squander fabulous sums in buying works that often have no more value than that of their illustrious grime, accumulated over centuries. The cold, anemic, soporific music of our grandfathers is inflicted on the public, while many young musicians wait in vain, in the anguish of an exhausting misery, for someone to deign to notice that even a living musician can have a bit of talent. And when we are not faced with the formidable army of dead geniuses, we have to contend with that army, not quite so strong though equally vast, of illustrious old dotards. And as if there were not enough, we have to defend ourselves day and night against the cunning assaults of the opportunists, of the narrow-minded and venal attitudes which abound in the world of art, and against these different legions of mummies, corpses, sextons, and grave robbers, we declare implacable war. The cult of the past and the commercialization of the arts, these are the two terrible plagues that are devastating our country. In our struggle, as a matter of course, we hold in contempt every sort of obedience, of docility and imitation. We despise all sedentary tastes and every kind of foot-dragging caution. We fight against majorities, corrupted by power, and spit on current and traditional opinions, just as we deride all moral and philosophical commonplaces. In the field of literature, we advance the ideal of a great and strong scientific literature, which, set free from every sort of classical claptrap, from every sort of erudite purism, will extol the most recent discoveries, the new intoxication with speed and the heavenly life of the aviator. Our poetry is essentially and unreservedly a poetry in revolt against established forms. We have to destroy the rail tracks of verse, to blow up the bridges to what has already been said, and set in motion the locomotives of our inspiration, along a path entirely determined by chance, toward the limitless fields of the new and the future. Far better a sensational journey that ends in disaster than a monotonous trail trudged every day. For far too long now we have put up with the station masters of poetry, the ticket inspectors of the metrical sleeping car, and the senseless punctuality of prosodic time-stables. In politics, we are as distant from internationalist, anti-patriotic socialism, a tawdry exaltation of the rights of the belly, as we are from timid clerical foggydom, symbolized by carpet slippers and bed warmers. All liberties and all progress within the great circle of the nation. We revere patriotism and militarism. Our song is war, soul cleanser of the world, proud flame of enthusiasm and generosity, noble baptism of heroism, without which people would stagnate in self-centered torpor, in their economic ambitions, in their poverty of mind and will. We despise and fight against the tyranny of love, which, especially among Latin peoples, sights down the energies of men of action. We fight against a rancid sentimentalism, an obsession with adultery, and the conquest of women in the novel, theater, and in life. All these burning dynamic ideas of ours annoy and exasperate the public, but we futurists are pleased about that, because our only fear is the easy approbation and insipid praises of the mediocre. We are certain that nothing is easier, and at the same time more despicable than pleasing the public, by flattering their uncouth, conventional tastes. Therefore we seek pleasure only in our great futurist ideal, and of a hostile public we ask nothing more than to be booed. The speech was greeted with a tremendous outburst of applause. The keels of the past crumble in the slapping groundswell of these excited hands. And here's Armando Mazza, with his huge athletic body, coming forward like a wrestler, his booming voice crashing against the theater's walls, and seems to cover the whole world with our primordial futurist wills. In reality, the mummified sages, the custodians of good sense, and all those who carry their armchairs on their backs, as do tortoises, their shells feel themselves crushed beneath the feet of that giant who, in a loud voice, calls on all firebrands to revolt. Down with the museums, let's rebury the dead. Let us glorify violence. Long live war, death to the pacifists. Away with the torpid majorities. All glory to the wild beasts. Red-hot punches, too, in the trembling chests of the traditionalists. The flayed shrubs warped by lava on the flanks of a volcano. Then the futurist poets, one after the other, and with the same devil-may-care attitude of students on the razzle, pour out in torrents the red wine of their sublime poetry, into 3,000 invisible goblets, held out enthusiastically to receive it. But all of a sudden, a great din breaks out and sets off an internal stampede. They're howling at the scandal. Hands of drowning spectators grip tight hold on to their seats. Others desperately clasp their round, bald heads, as if they were seizing hold of the world to save it. Lifeless eyes search anxiously for crucifixes that are nowhere to be seen. The raging of the throng increases. It's the great uprising of the mummies. Not one of them is Italian. They're all Austrian, or else lickspittles. But in the end, powerful youth prevails. All the men are on their feet, and with their fists, with the exploding of their voices, they force the dead to lie down in their tombs. The gust of enthusiasm urges us outside and carries us through the streets of Trieste. We go into the Café Milano, a furnace that releases burning brands of delirious cheers upon us. Around the great fraternal table, flushed cheeks, fire in the voices, poetry and patriotism fermenting vermilion. Armando Mazza is prevailed upon to recite the famous manifesto for a third time. There's an abundance of alcohol, flowing freely, and it sets people's minds on fire. A young man stands up, his eyes electrified with creative intelligence, and proclaims his futurist faith, his ardent support for our movement and rebellion against the past. Everyone listens to him intently, and he, overtaken by frenzied inspiration, lets fly 1,000 contradictory ideas like so many rockets shooting out, without a break from their launcher. This man is the stout Triestan poet Mario Cavalli. We leave the Café Milano to take our fiery Italian souls into the nighttime lair of the Austrian officers, the Eden. However, there we find lots of Hungarians, who with their actions and dances are accompanying a wild imbroglio of gypsy violins. They greet us warmly, extolling the liberation of Hungary and Trieste, and willing martyrs of patriotism. They shimmy to the sonorous hammering of a zambal and the wild bowing of violins. Joy, madness, and war. In a corner, a few Austrian officers reveal the same jaundiced color as their flag. When we leave, a frenzied student-like devil-may-care intoxication infects our boisterous column. We futurists have no hesitation in proclaiming the death of wisdom, the ignominy of the word prudence. God help anyone who is incapable of a bold hooliganism. God help anyone who every night does not feel himself to be the absolute lord of the city, swollen with indignation at those who are sleeping. In a long Indian file, at first we walk rapidly, and then we break into a run, forming noisy, mocking chains around the foul-looking faces of the policemen, those walking urinals. So, still running, we arrive at the San Carlo quay. A great yacht rides at anchor, with its 3 tall masts piercing the clouds. How far up do they go, those masts? We simply have to know. Up and up. Who could stop us following their sharp leap away into the sky? What does it matter if the yacht is swaying, if the rigging is whining in the fearsome breath of the Bora? And we clamber up by the mainmast, looking for the nests of the stars. From up there we shall maybe make out on the horizon the lights of the awe-inspiring naval squadron of Admiral Bettolo. We set off then towards Cervola, whose whitish clouds of smoke down there are like huge pillars constructed to bear the reddening vaults of the night. Happy as schoolboys let loose, we surge around the sooty bellies of the foundries, which give birth to great walls of sparks. Cries of victory burst from our breasts. At last, the craziest of futurist images becomes a reality. See these fiery buildings on the march, disemboweling themselves and spilling their innards of topaz and rubies on the ground. And so we witness the fusion of the new, futurist sun, which is deeper in color, more fantastic and hotter than the old one of yesterday. So intently do we watch its immense incandescent flow in monstrous chimneys, gigantic windlasses, all plumed in smoke, that we don't even hear the screeching flight of the trains passing beneath our feet, those scurrying iron mice. Oh, how envious we are of the houses crouched on the hills around attentive houses, whose eyes are lit up each night by the intoxicating jewels of fire. How we envy the clouds with their faces warmed and the sea's horizon furrowed by long scarlet reflections. In Trieste, young people never sleep. Theirs is a healthy insomnia, which made us devour the great futurist feast offered us by our friends and wittily served in inverse order. Coffee, sweet memories on ice, marmalade of dead glories, mummy roast with professorial liver, archaeological salad, goulash of the past with explosive peas served in a history sauce, Dead Sea fish, clotted blood soup, entree of demolition, vermouth. Everywhere in the sumptuous halls of the Philharmonica, in the intellectual salons and fashionable meeting places, the ladies vied with each other in presenting us with gifts and exquisite courtesies. They had been fascinated rather than alarmed by the incendiary force of our futurist determination. We left the city reluctantly, our eyes already turned toward new battlefields. Trieste accompanied us to our train, and their 100 most illustrious sons, who ran behind our wagon, applauded us with lusty shouts of "Long live Italy! Long live futurism!" This text appeared in Marinetti's compilation Rapporto sulla vittoria del futurismo a Trieste, published as an introduction to Aldo Palazzeschi's L'Incendiario, 1910. It was reprinted in a revised form in Guerra sulla igiene del mondo, 1915, and in a highly condensed manner in L'Italia Futurista, March 18, 1917.